The sky over Con 9 was always crimson, not the soft red of a sunset, but thick with ash and dust that never settled. The atmosphere itself seemed bruised, scarred by centuries of mining blasts and volcanic storms. The sun never really set here, not in the way people remembered back on Earth. It bled across the horizon like an open wound, staining the jagged rocks and abandoned scaffolds with endless fire. Captain Adrian Thorne stood on the battered watchtower, boots planted on rusted steel, his eyes locked on the horizon. He wasn't stationed here by choice. No one was. Con 9 was not a posting, it was a dumping ground. The Federation called it a mining outpost, but everyone on Con 9 knew the truth. It was a penal colony wrapped in bureaucracy, a place for the broken, the violent, the unwanted. Thorne had killed too many during the sovereign rebellions to walk free on Earth. His medals had been stripped, his name erased from honor rolls, his service quietly buried. Earth didn't want killers walking its pristine cities. So they sent him here to die slowly under alien skis, clawing rare minerals out of poisoned soil. Still, even in exile, he carried himself like a soldier. His back was straight, his gaze sharp, his silence heavy. And the other men, criminals, mercenaries, dishonored soldiers, respected that, or feared it. Life on Con 9 was fire and dust. Day after day, men drilled into rock for minerals most of them couldn't name. They slept in steel barracks carved into the mountainside. They ate protein slop recycled from fungi vats. They washed in brine that left their skin raw. Some went mad. Others drank until their hearts gave out. Only a few kept moving, powered by something more stubborn than despair. For Thorne, that something was instinct. Soldiers didn't stop, even when stripped of their war. The first sign of change came with static. At 200 hours, the long-range channel filled with garbled noise, then silence. They thought it was a flare storm. Then the satellites began winking out, one after another. No feeds, no weather reports, no signals. Some blamed the sun, others cursed at the Federation for neglect. But deep down, everyone knew. It wasn't nature. It was something worse. At 300 hours, the sky tore open. There was no warning siren, no flashing lights. The bombardment was silent from inside the bunker. When they emerged hours later, the colony wasn't attacked, it was erased. Children, workers, infirm elders, gone. Burnt shadows clung to the walls where bodies once stood. Ash lay in drifts where lungs had once breathed. The stench of scorched flesh hung in the air, thick, stubborn, refusing to leave. And above it all, blotting out the blood-red sun, hovered the enemy. 10 of them, black, chitin-plated dreadships, each veined with pools in green light. They hung in the skis like gods come to judge. No hails, no demands, no declaration of war. Just extermination. The Varnek. Thorne didn't speak when he saw the destruction. He walked through the rubble like a ghost, fists clenched, jaw locked. The others, what few remained, looked to him. Old instincts die hard. When chaos comes, men seek orders. And Adrian Thorne had the look of someone who would never kneel. A miner cradling a bleeding arm staggered up to him. "What do we do, Cap? We can't fight that. We don't even have a comm tower." Thorne stared at the sky, at the arrogant silhouettes above. "We won't signal for help." The miner swallowed hard. "Then we're dead." Thorne's voice was low, iron-cold. "No, they are." The survivors didn't understand. Not yet, but they would. Con 9 had been a graveyard for men with nothing left. Ex-soldiers, assassins, thieves, mercenaries cast aside, outcasts no one remembered, but now they had something. Vengeance. It took 2 days to rig the distress probe. Thorne loaded it with coordinates, encryption codes, and one message. Con 9, civilian massacre by Varnak fleet. Unprovoked. No survivors. To any remaining human command, you created us to fight your wars. You exiled us when peace was no longer profitable. Now let us do what we were made for. Give us a fleet or give us nothing. We will burn them either way. The probe launched into the bleeding sky, a thin spark against the endless dark. It would take 6 days to reach Earth, if Earth even listened. In the meantime, Thorne gathered the wreckage. He forged weapons from the ruins. Broken drones became mines. Power cores became bombs. Generators were stripped for plasma coils. In the shadows of genocide, something ancient stirred. The will to fight. By the 5th night, the air temperature dropped below freezing. Winds screamed through twisted rebar, howling across the skeletal remains of schools, homes, shelters. The survivors huddled deep in old mining tunnels, beneath a slab of concrete disguised as a collapsed wall. They weren't mourning. They were planning a war. Inside the chamber, a rusted table served as their war map. Across it lay old blueprints scavenged from colony servers, sketches drawn in coal and blood. There were 23 survivors. No heroes, no politicians, no priests, just killers and broken men. And at the head of the table stood Thorn, shirtless, burned scars marking his chest, faded military tattoos wrapping his arms like ghosts of another life, his eyes cold as stone. "We can't wait for Earth," he said, his voice cut through the stale air. "If they come, it'll be for politics, for speeches, too late, too clean, they'll talk of apologies." He looked up, his gaze dead calm. "We're not asking for peace." The men stirred, restless. Davin, a former dropship pilot court-martialed for striking a superior, leaned forward. "What's the play, Cap? We've got scraps, hollow threats, they've got dreadships." Thorn shifted a piece across the map, a jagged rock marked with a red X. "They missed something. Sector L9, old weapons cache, Cold War era before the treaties, still has a hangar bay underneath. I used to guard it." "You think it's still stocked?" Davin asked. Thorn's lips curved in the faintest shadow of a grin. "I know it is. Earth forgot. I didn't, and we're taking it." From the back, a bitter laugh. Merrick, a sniper with tremors in his right hand, scoffed. "How the hell are we getting past half the Varnak fleet? They're in orbit like vultures waiting for a heartbeat." Thorn's grin widened. It wasn't humor, it was defiance. "We give them what they want." The decoy was ugly. A scavenged mining pod fitted with thrusters, disguised to look like an escape capsule. They rigged it to broadcast false life signs, then aimed it toward the nearest human outpost. The Varnak took the bait. One ship broke formation, gliding down like a predator, preparing to erase the pod with clinical efficiency. That was when Thorn's men struck. They had no real rifles, only plasma lances cobbled from coils. They had no armor, only scavenged plating. They had no training left, only instincts. But instincts were enough. Explosives buried under ash roared to life. The ground heaved. Fire split the night. The Varnak vessel shuddered as its landing gear tore away in a column of molten rock. Thorn moved like a machine, silent, unblinking. He dragged a Varnak officer from the wreckage, shoved a barrel into its jaw, and waited for its black eyes to lock on him. "You think you know war," he whispered. Then he pulled the trigger. Green blood sprayed across the rubble. The survivors stormed the broken ship, hacking, burning, tearing until the deck ran slick. It wasn't clean. It wasn't efficient. But it was human. And when the fire died, the ship was theirs. Damaged, groaning, barely flyable. But theirs. Thorn stood in the shattered bridge, staring at the cracked viewport. The stars beyond burned cold and sharp. "Get us to L9, he said, voice iron. The survivors exchanged glances, exhausted, bloodied, but something new lit their eyes. Hope twisted with vengeance. The engines screamed as the stolen cruiser lurched skyward, breaking through crimson clouds. For the first time since the massacre, the survivors of K9 rose into the stars. And none of them knew if they'd ever come back. The stolen Varnak cruiser limped through the void, its hull groaning with every pulse of its mismatched engines. The ship wasn't meant for human hands. Its systems hissed in alien glyphs, its controls stubborn under clumsy rewiring. Sparks rained from junction boxes. Oxygen was thin. Every breath tasted of copper and oil. But none of the men complained. They slept on cold steel decks, cradling makeshift weapons like children clutching toys. They ate nutrient paste scavenged from emergency packs. They rotated shifts at the controls, guided only by Thorn's memory and a flickering star chart more than 20 years out of date. 9 hours into dead space, Davin broke the silence. "Something's wrong," he muttered, hunched in the pilot's chair, his voice rasped with fatigue. "This sector should have been crawling with scouts. During the rebellions, whole fleets clashed here. Now, nothing, not even a ping." Merrick leaned against the bulkhead, fingers twitching near the trigger of his jury-rigged rifle. His tremors were worse in the cold. Maybe the Varnak already cleaned it, wiped it bare. Thorn stood behind them, arms crossed. His gaze stayed on the viewport where the asteroid field glittered like frozen shrapnel. No, they didn't dare touch this place. Federation erased it, buried it, like a war crime no one wanted remembered. Silence followed. No one liked the sound of that. As the ship drifted closer, the void itself seemed to shift. Lights shimmered along the asteroid belt, faint blue glows, pulsing one by one. Then, as if waking from a century of sleep, cannons turned. Dozens, old, scarred, but alive, each one locking onto their cruiser with mechanical precision. Merrick swore under his breath, "We're dead." Davin's hands flew across the controls. "Tell me you've got a trick, Cap, because I'm not dodging 30 cannons with this flying coffin." Thorne's answer was calm, too calm. "This isn't for dodging." He pulled a chipped dog tag from around his neck, scratched, battered, its engraving barely visible. Without ceremony, he slid it into the alien console. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the screen blinked. Federation blue flared across alien green. Letters scrolled. "Access granted. Captain Adrinthorne. Code BLACKFIRE." The asteroid field shifted. Cannons retracted. Doors yawned open in the largest rock, its surface splitting like the jaw of a buried beast. A hangar bay flickered to life, lights humming weakly after decades of silence. Davin stared wide-eyed. "You're telling me this whole sector, this entire graveyard, was just waiting for you?" Thorne's face didn't change. Not waiting, locked away. The cruiser limped forward, swallowed by the opening maw of the asteroid. The hangar sealed behind them, shadows swallowing crimson light. Inside, silence. Rows of machines slept under layers of dust, war machines. Forgotten war machines. They disembarked with weapons raised, footsteps echoing on steel. The hangar stretched wide as a cathedral, walls lined with rusting craft. Fighter frames, drone racks, missile tubes, some shattered, others intact, each one stamped with Federation sigils long outlawed. Merrick ran a trembling hand over a cracked missile casing. These are nukes. Old ones, fire and forget, no safeties. They banned these before I was even born." Thorne walked past him without comment. His boots left prints in the dust. He stopped at a console near the far wall. The screen sputtered alive under his touch, coughing sparks but obeying. Blueprints scrolled, weapons lists, deployment logs. Cold War relics. Antimatter charges, dark missiles, cloaked drone spiders, orbital skinners designed to peel the atmosphere off planets like fruit. Weapons so terrible the Federation had buried them, instead of admitting they'd built them. And now they were his. Davin whistled low, shaking his head. "You realize what this means, Cap? Earth didn't just exile us. They dumped us in reach of the devil's closet, like they wanted us to rot but left the bones sharp enough to cut." Thorne's eyes scanned the lists. His face was stone. "They thought no one would ever come back. They were wrong. It took 8 days to restore the base. Power was rerouted from dormant reactors. AI systems were rebooted, their old security protocols wiped and rewritten. Food synthesizers churned thin but edible rations. Drones scurried through the halls, patching leaks, sweeping dust. And the weapons, they came alive again. The survivors became mechanics, welders, soldiers. Men who once had nothing but exile now had purpose. They stripped the stolen Varnak cruiser to its bones, bolting human engines to alien shields, wiring Federation death tech into its veins. They painted its scarred hull black with a single red stripe across its side, a warning more than a name. They called it Judgment. And it wasn't alone. 7 other ships rose from the graveyard, welded together with fury and duct tape. Fighters were reborn, missiles refitted, drones awakened with new programming. The men trained. 0G drills, boarding simulations, target runs. They fought through exhaustion, through bleeding knuckles and burned skin. When one of the younger men broke down during decompression training, gasping and sobbing, Thorne didn't yell. He stood over him, eyes pale as stone. "They burned your daughter in that colony," he said. "Crying won't change that, killing them will. Get up." The boy got up. Every one of them did. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were monsters forged from loss. On the 9th day, the first signal came. Not from Earth. From the Varnak. Encrypted in alien glyphs, bleeding through the base's receivers. It decrypted slowly, agonizing syllable by syllable, until the message took form. To the human anomaly occupying the dead sector, surrender. You are outnumbered. The K-9 operation was authorized. You are not recognized under any sovereign flag. Resistance is suicide. You will not be warned again. The men listened in silence. Some shifted uneasily, others tightened grips on their weapons. Thorn leaned forward. His fingers tapped across the console, his reply short, sharp, and unyielding. Warning received. Return to your masters. Tell them the ashes of Ka-9 are coming to collect. No flag, no politics, just vengeance. We are the Armada, and you've made our purpose clear. He sent it, then deleted it. They weren't doing this for speeches. They were doing it for retribution. The first raid came 3 days later. The judgment decloaked 3 clicks from a Varnak refueling station orbiting KZ Theta. No announcement, no demands, just fire. 6 plasma rods launched into the station's core. 10 seconds later it was gone, the blast so bright it erased a moon off the star map. The men cheered in silence. The second strike was darker. A Varnak science vessel, no military value, just labs. Inside they found documents, charts, records. How Ka-9 had been chosen. The scientists had studied human emotional responses, trauma thresholds, recovery rates. They'd cataloged grief, modeled vengeance. Ka-9 hadn't been random, it had been an experiment. Thorn executed them all personally. No mercy, no trial, just a bullet for each. When it was done, he stood in silence, boots sticky with alien blood. His voice came low, iron, and final. They wanted to measure vengeance. His eyes burned. Now they'll see it. The news spread faster than fire and oxygen. A refueling station gone in a single flash. A science vessel ripped apart with its crew executed. And the whispers, humans had done it. Not sanctioned soldiers, not Federation fleets, but ghosts from Ka-9. The galaxy stirred uneasily. Merchants whispered of monsters born in the mines. Alien envoys warned their governments that humanity's criminals had risen again. And on Earth, the halls of high command filled with murmurs of something they had long feared. Adrian Thorn was alive. On the judgment, the men gathered around the hollow display. The decrypted Varnak data shimmered before them, proof that Ka-9 had been chosen, not by chance, but by design. The Varnak had studied them, weighed their grief, measured their anger like rats in a cage. Davin slammed his fist on the console. They burned our families for numbers, for charts, for their damn science. Merrick spat on the floor. Then we're not rebels, we're lab results. Thorn said nothing. He just stared at the lines of alien script scrolling down the screen. His jaw flexed, but his eyes stayed calm. Finally, he spoke. They thought we were variables to measure. They forgot we can change the equation. He turned to the men. This isn't vengeance anymore, it's proof that they can never control us. The words hit hard. No cheers, just silence, heavy and grim. The silence didn't last. 3 days later, a message arrived. Not from the Varnak, not from fringe colonies. From Earth. Encrypted, high priority, stamped with the Federation's crest. The men gathered in the command bay as Thorn opened it. A cold female voice filled the air, bureaucratic and sharp as steel. Adrian Thorn, you are hereby ordered to cease hostilities against the Varnak Confederacy. Your unauthorized attacks have disrupted intergalactic treaties and endangered fragile peace corridors. Stand down immediately. Surrender your vessels to the nearest authorized outpost. This is your final warning. Failure to comply will result in your designation as a rogue warlord under Article 77 of the Colonial Warfare Act. Earth will not protect you. Silence followed. Then the laughter began. It wasn't joy, it was bitter, raw, disbelieving. Merrick barked a laugh so sharp it echoed off the steel. They wait until now, after the colony burned, after we buried children with our hands, now they want lectures. Davin cursed under his breath. Screw Earth, they left us to die years ago. The men spat, cursed, shook their heads, but Thorn didn't laugh. He replayed the words again, eyes narrowing as the title scrolled across the screen. Rogue Warlord. That's what Earth had called him. His lips curled into something that wasn't a smile. Then so be it. They stopped hiding. No more stealth strikes, no more hit-and-run raids. The Armada of Vengeance came into the light. Their next target, a Varnak dry dock orbiting the Veltraz Sea, a superstructure 5 kilometers wide, where dreadships were built and refitted. This time they didn't cloak. This time they broadcast a message live, across 50 systems, to every species listening. Thorn stood on the command deck, his scarred chest bare, his voice hard as iron. Ka-9 was wiped out in silence. Earth turned its back. The Varnak laughed. You let it happen. Now we bring fire. This is not war. This is retribution. Stand with them and burn with them. The words echoed across the stars. Within hours, galactic news feeds erupted in panic. Diplomats called him a terrorist. Federation officials disavowed him, called him a stain on humanity. But out on the fringes, among miners, outcasts, and veterans who had been thrown away, the name Adrian Thorn became something else. A banner, a reminder that humanity still had teeth. The Armada struck at dawn cycle. The Judgment and its sister ships tore through the blockade, their hulls black and red, their weapons glowing like the mouths of demons. Missiles screamed across the void, striking the dry dock's central spine. Explosions rippled through the structure as dreadnought frames split and melted. Varnak fighters swarmed, hundreds, plasma streaks lit the dark. The battle became chaos, men screaming, steel tearing, fire consuming oxygen. The Judgment took 3 direct hits, its shields collapsing, hull bleeding sparks. But Thorn didn't retreat. Full speed ahead, he ordered. The crew obeyed. The Judgment slammed through the station's central ring, ripping metal apart with its own body. Charges detonated. The explosion gutted the dry dock, turning it into a burning carcass drifting across the sea below. By the time the flames died, the Armada floated among debris, half their ships scarred, 14 men dead. The survivors gathered in silence. No speeches, no prayers. Each body was wrapped in scorched banners and vented into the void. The men drank from recycled whiskey bottles, jaws clenched, eyes hollow. Finally, Thorn spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We kill them until they remember our names. The men raised their bottles in silence. Earth remembered. And this time, they didn't send messages. They sent the hammer. 3 carriers, 4 dreadnoughts, 30 escorts, the best Earth had. The hammer dropped out of warp in the outer rings of the Sorin system, where the Armada had been constructing a forward station. Shining, pristine ships, untouched by war, gleaming with polished insignia. They hailed him. Captain Thorn, this is Admiral Gyron under direct orders from Earth High Command. You are outgunned. Stand down, surrender your ships. You will be taken alive if you comply. This is not a negotiation. The men shifted uneasily. Some whispered, some cursed. Thorn stood still, his pale eyes fixed on the screen. Then he spoke, his voice carrying across every ship, every channel. Admiral Gyron, you wear the uniform I once killed for. You hide behind orders I once believed in. Tell me, did Earth send you to avenge Ka-9 or to silence the ones who didn't die quietly? Silence answered. Thorn's fists clenched, his voice sharpened. I watched children burn in their sleep. I begged for help. Earth looked away. Now we speak in a language you've forgotten, fire, blood, revenge. We're not standing down. You want us. Come bleed for it. He cut the channel. The men cheered like wolves. The battle began 30 minutes later. The hammer opened with shock missiles, EMP waves designed to cripple, but Thorn had anticipated it. The Armada scattered into the asteroid field, deploying stealth drones laced with raw uranium shells. Ambushes erupted from every shadow. The void turned into a storm of fire and shrapnel. The hammer's carriers unleashed squadrons of fighters. The Armada's makeshift ships fought like demons, not disciplined, not clean, but reckless, feral, desperate. And that was the difference. The hammer fought to subdue. The Armada fought to scar. 2 carriers went down, one ripped open by a suicide run, the other gutted by a stolen Varnak Skinner bomb that peeled its armor like paper. The Judgment itself took heavy fire. Its starboard guns were torn away. Fires roared across its decks. Thorn was thrown against a bulkhead, blood dripping from his brow. He dragged himself up, teeth bared. Keep firing. Don't stop until they remember Ka-9. The battle raged for 3 hours. When it was done, the hammer retreated. The Federation's best had bled, and it had not been enough. The men of Ka-9 stood battered, broken, but alive. And Earth had no choice but to see them. That night in the silence after the fight, Thorn sat alone in his quarters. He pulled a photo from the rubble of Ka-9, a little girl in a blue dress, smiling. She couldn't have been more than 7. He traced her face with a bloody fingertip. I don't even know her name, he whispered. Behind him, Merrick's voice came low. We're making them remember, Cap, one by one. Thorne nodded slowly. His eyes stayed on the photo. Not enough, he said. Not yet. The hammer limped away into silence. For days afterward, the Federation made no move. No reinforcements, no transmissions, not even propaganda. It was as though Earth was holding its breath, recalculating, trying to decide whether Adrian Thorne was an infection to burn out or a weapon they might one day need. But Thorne didn't wait. The Judgment sat crippled in the dark, its hull scorched, its decks slick with blood and coolant. Fires had been stamped out, breaches patched with scrap. The men slept in shifts, curled in corners, weapons never far from reach. It should have felt like victory. They had broken the hammer, they had bloodied Earth's best. But there was no celebration, no cheers, just exhaustion, and a question no one voiced aloud. What now? The answer came from Davin. He was hunched over the tactical bay's main console, eyes red from sleepless nights, fingers dancing across lines of alien code. Merrick leaned nearby, his right hand twitching as usual, trying to keep still. At first it was noise, corrupted logs, static fragments pulled from the wreckage of the Varnak science vessel they had taken. Most dismissed it as trash data, but Davin kept at it. On the fourth night, his voice cracked through the calm. Cap, you need to see this. Thorne arrived, his pale eyes narrowing as Davin projected the decrypted fragments. It wasn't random reports, it wasn't meaningless logs. It was a name. Project Vilfir. Davin zoomed in on the fragments, lines of alien script fused with old Federation tags. This wasn't just a Varnak program, Davin said. These codes are human, pre-rebellion, before K9 even existed, joint project, human and Varnak. Merrick frowned, joint, as in both sides planned it. Davin nodded. Not weapons, not defenses, people, human minds. They ran thousands of simulations, death scenarios, loss patterns, psychological breakdowns. They weren't trying to beat us with firepower. They were trying to map grief, vengeance, the thing they never understood. Thorne's fists clenched, his voice came low. They studied us, and when they couldn't control the results, they buried it, Davin finished. Merrick's voice was bitter, and buried K9 with it. The room fell silent. Thorne stared at the screen, his reflection cold and hollow in the glow. He remembered the little girl in the photo, the ashes of children clinging to burned walls, the screams no one had answered. It wasn't war, it wasn't conquest. It was containment. K9 had been chosen not for resources, not for strategy, but because it was expendable. Because it was the perfect test, site to erase proof of Project Vilfir. The revelation spread through the Armada like fire through dry brush. Men whispered in corridors. Some spat curses at Earth, others at the Varnak. Some fell silent, broken by the knowledge that they had never been soldiers in a war, only lab rats in an experiment too monstrous to name. Davin slammed a console in frustration. All those years, Cap, all those battles, all the medals, the speeches, lies, they were studying us the whole time, like we were weapons to refine. Thorne didn't answer. He stood staring out the viewport at the endless black beyond. His eyes were dead calm. Finally, he spoke. Then we give them proof they can't bury. The target was chosen carefully. Not a military base, not a weapons cache. A diplomatic archive orbiting HR, a neutral world. A place where treaties were stored, where envoys from a dozen species met under banners of peace. Untouchable by agreement, sacred by law. Which made it perfect. Because if proof of Project Vilfir existed anywhere, it would be there. The men prepared in silence, weapons checked, armor patched, ships refueled. They cloaked their signatures under falsified codes, posing as a dead merchant convoy. No flags, no colors, just shadows slipping through the void. Boarding the station was almost anticlimactic. No guards, no alarms. Just protocol drones humming through polished halls, archivists floating serenely among endless shelves of data cores. The Armada's men moved like phantoms, their boots soft on steel. Thorne led them into the lower levels, past halls lined with banners of unity and peace, past promises already broken. The archive core was buried 3 floors below the dome, a sealed chamber of glowing servers, humming with centuries of secrets. Davin hacked the locks in 20 minutes. The door hissed open. Inside, the truth waited. They found logs, videos, meeting records. Federation diplomats, Varnak generals together. Authorizing K9. Not just ignoring it, planning it. Containment preferable to confrontation. Collateral losses acceptable. Project Veilfire must remain classified. Thorn watched, his face stone. His men stood frozen, jaws clenched, hands shaking. The final video cut deeper than all the rest. Admiral Gyron, the same man who had led the hammer against them. His voice calm, precise. If the fringe colonies must die to preserve galactic peace, so be it. History will forget them. The feed ended. Silence. Thorn's hands trembled, not from fear, from restraint. Merrick spat on the floor. They didn't just abandon us, they murdered us to bury their sins. Thorn turned, his voice like a blade. Not anymore. The files were uploaded. Not encrypted, not hidden. Broadcast raw to every system within reach. To colonies, to fleets, to the inner worlds, to the aliens who thought humanity weak. Every lie, every memo, every meeting, every word. Unfiltered, unforgivable. The galaxy lit up in flames. Riots erupted on Earth. Protesters stormed Federation buildings. Colonies seceded. Alien consulates burned. Soldiers deserted, unwilling to serve the liars who had bartered away lives like currency. And the Armada of Vengeance was no longer a rumor. It was a revolution. On the Judgment, the men watched the chaos unfold across fractured comm feeds. Some laughed, some wept, some sat in stunned silence. Davin leaned against the console, voice hoarse. "We did it, Cap. They can't bury it now. The truth is out." Thorn didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the screen, not at the riots, not at the speeches. At the chaos, at the fractures, at the cracks splitting the galaxy apart. His voice was quiet. "No, not yet. This is just the beginning." The galaxy burned with truth. Project Veilfire was no longer a rumor whispered in back alleys. It was broadcast across the stars, undeniable, unforgivable. The Federation tried to contain it with speeches and lies, but the footage was too raw, too real. Colonies rioted, admirals resigned, consulates went up in flames. The Armada grew. More ships drifted into their ranks, deserters, mercenaries, even alien outlaws who hated the Varnak enough to side with Thorn. 43 ships now, some patched together with rust and fury, others sleek and deadly. The Forgotten had teeth again. But Earth was not finished. They had failed with fleets, failed with politics, failed with silence. Now they turned to something different. Not an army. A man. The message arrived without ceremony. No seals, no warnings, no declarations. Just a transmission across an old, restricted channel. It activated automatically in the Judgment's command deck, playing in a voice Thorn hadn't heard in years. "Adrian," the voice said, calm, cold, precise. "You made your point. You've turned yourself into what they feared most. Now they've turned me loose. You and I both know how this ends. Come alone, no fleets, no theatrics. Sector 7 Lambda, where it all began." The feed cut. The men looked at Thorn. None spoke. They didn't have to. They all knew the name behind that voice. Commander Rick. Thorn's old squad leader. The only man he had ever followed without question. The only man he had ever betrayed. The ghost Earth had kept in the dark until they needed something brutal, something clean. And now he had been sent to erase Adrian Thorn. The command bay buzzed with fury. "No way, Cap," Davin snapped. "This is suicide. He's not coming alone, you know it." Merrick spat. "It's a trap. He'll have half the fleet waiting." Thorn's eyes stayed locked on the dark screen. His jaw flexed once. "I gave Rick my loyalty once. I broke it when I exposed what they were doing. He doesn't need fleets. If he's here to end it himself." "You can't go," Davin pressed. "Not after everything. You think K9 fought this hard just to watch you walk into a grave?" Thorn turned slowly, his stare sharp enough to cut steel. "This isn't about K9, it's about ghosts. If I don't face him, he'll bleed all of you to get to me. That's how he works." Silence. Finally, Thorn said the words none of them wanted to hear. "Prep my pod." The flight to Sector 7 Lambda took 6 hours. Thorn went alone. One man, one stripped-down pod, No cloaks, no escorts, no weapons save for a plasma blade locked beneath the console. A relic weapon, manual trigger, unstable core, dangerous as its wielder. He spent the flight in silence, staring at the stars. Sector 7 was cursed ground, a battlefield from the sovereign rebellions, littered with corpses still frozen in orbit. It was where Thorn and Rick had first learned to kill without questions. And now it was where they would finish it. The pod landed on a rusting Federation cruiser buried in asteroid rock. Atmosphere flickered in and out, enough to breathe but not enough to feel alive. Thorn stepped into the cracked hangar, boots crunching glass and bone. And there he was. Rick. Time had not softened him. His posture was the same. His face the same, hard, precise, unyielding. Only a scar across his jaw betrayed the years. His eyes were still voids of steel, unblinking, unshaken. He wore no insignia, just black. Adrian, Rick said quietly. Rick, Thorn answered. No handshakes, no salutes. Just two wolves circling a grave. Rick spoke first. You should have died with the others. That would have been clean. Thorn stepped closer. His voice was low, sharp. So this is it, Earth's final offer, a bullet from the past. No offer, Rick said flatly. I'm not here to negotiate, I'm here to clean up the mess. Thorn barked a laugh, bitter and hollow. The mess, you mean the truth, K9, Project Veilfear, don't lie to me, you knew. Rick's eyes didn't waver. I knew, we both did, we signed the same papers. Thorn's jaw clenched. And you let them burn for it, you let children choke on ash, for what? To protect Earth's little fantasy of peace. Rick's answer was cold. Not peace, balance, chaos like yours spreads, it makes martyrs out of madmen. You're not a hero, Adrian, you're a consequence. Thorn's eyes narrowed. I never asked to be a hero. No, Rick said softly. You asked to be remembered, and now they'll remember you as the man who started a war that never had to happen. The blades came out. Rick's weapon hummed with perfect efficiency. A Federation plasma edge, precise, clean, deadly. Thorn sputtered when it lit, flickering blue, unstable, dangerous. Half dead, just like him. Their first clash sent sparks showering across the hangar. Rick fought like a machine, every strike center mass, every move clean, no wasted energy. Thorn fought like a storm, wild, brutal, raw, every strike personal, every movement born of hate buried for years. Metal screamed, glass shattered, their boots cracked the floor with every blow. Thorn took a slice across the ribs, hissing in pain, but he slammed his shoulder into Rick's chest, sending them both crashing into a ruined console. Still sloppy, Rick muttered, pushing up. Still a coward, Thorn growled. They clashed again, blades locking, sparks burning across their faces. Rick snarled. You think this changes anything? You burn a few stations, kill a few envoys, and what? You think Earth cares? You think the Varnak care? You're nothing but fire in the wind. Thorn's voice roared. I don't care if they care. I want them to feel. I want every coward who signed those papers to wake up screaming, remembering the day they made me. Rick shoved hard. Then you're no different from the Varnak, just another monster screaming for blood. Thorn's teeth bared. Better a monster that tells the truth than a soldier who dies with a lie in his mouth. The fight turned savage. Rick swept Thorn's legs, dropping him hard. His blade swung down for the kill. Thorn rolled, grabbed a broken pipe, and drove it into Rick's side just under the armor. Rick staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. He dropped to one knee, coughing, but his hand still reached for a sidearm. You'll die here, Adrian, Rick whispered. Your war ends in a tomb. Thorn stood above him, blade flickering, nearly dead. For the first time in years, pity touched his voice. You already died, Rick, the day you stopped asking questions. He turned his back. Rick pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed, choked with rust and blood. And Adrian Thorn walked away. Not because he forgave. Because Rick wasn't worth the bullet. Thorn returned to the judgment bleeding, his side torn open. He stitched himself in silence while Davin waited nearby. Well, Davin asked finally. He's finished, Thorn said. Dead. No, Thorn's eyes burned. Worse, defeated. The fight with Rick left Thorn scarred. His ribs ached with every breath, his side bound tight with bloody bandages. But pain was nothing new. He wore it like a second skin. What mattered was that the ghost of his past was finished. For the first time since Ka-9 burned, he thought they might finally be gaining ground. Then the Varnak answered. Not with fleets, not with science vessels. With fire. It happened at Sarsis IV. A trade hub, neutral, known for its peace markets where humans and aliens alike bartered without politics or war. Families lived there, merchants thrived there, children laughed in streets painted with neon banners. The Varnak erased it in 12 minutes. 4 dreadships decloaked in orbit. They didn't hail. They didn't demand surrender. They simply dropped thermonuclear orbital mines into the atmosphere. The sky went white. The surface melted. 2 million lives, civilians, traders, children, turned to ash. The Varnak broadcast one message across every channel afterward, their alien tongue translated into a single line. This is the cost of harboring insurgents. This is the price of truth. When the feed reached the judgment, silence consumed the command deck. The survivors of Ka-9 stood frozen, eyes wide, jaws clenched. Even men hardened by years of blood couldn't hide their horror. Merrick whispered first, his voice thin, 2 million gone. Davin's fists trembled against the console. This isn't retaliation. This is escalation. They know if they don't end us now, they'll lose control forever. Thorn stood at the center, his face carved from stone. His fists clenched so hard blood dripped from his palms. They're scared, Merrick muttered. No, Thorn said, his voice low, sharp. They're desperate. He slammed a knife into the table, the steel ringing across the chamber. This isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone they abandoned, everyone Earth betrayed, everyone the Varnak tried to erase. They call this war. His eyes burned. Then we give them war. But Earth moved first. Hours after the fall of Sarsis IV, High Command issued a decree. Any colony or system offering aid to the Armada of Vengeance would be classified as hostile. No trials, no diplomacy, only fire. Federation fleets began burning supply lines, raiding outer colonies suspected of helping Thorn. Entire towns vanished under cover of containment operations. Families disappeared into silence. The Armada's own supply routes were ambushed, convoys torn apart by former Earth allies. Ships limped back half destroyed. Earth and Varnak were united by fear. And fear meant total war. Still, the Armada grew. For every supply line lost, another broken soldier joined. For every colony silenced, 2 more whispered allegiance. Even alien mercenary bands joined, some for coin, some for hate, some because vengeance spoke in a language they understood. The Armada wasn't just human anymore. It was a storm, a force made of outcasts and exiles, patched ships and burning hearts. But Thorn knew they needed more than raids. They needed something impossible, something suicidal. A strike that would shatter the galaxy. The target was clear. Varnak Prime. The Heartworld, the untouchable jewel of their empire. A planet wrapped in fleets, surrounded by defense satellites strong enough to cut moons in half. No sane commander would even approach it. Which was exactly why Thorn chose it. We breached their home, he said in the War Council. His voice was steady, unshakable. Not their fleets, not their stations, their home. We hit the dome itself. We burned the vault. Davin's eyes narrowed. The vault. Thorn nodded. Project Veilfire began with them. If proof exists of every crime, every experiment, every colony they erased, it's buried in their core archive. We expose it, and the galaxy won't just riot. It will revolt. Merrick shook his head. That's suicide. Their orbital AI alone could melt us in 90 seconds. Thorn's lips curled in that humorless half-smile. Then we make those 90 seconds count. The plan was madness. They would warp into the system from the uncharted side, avoiding standard gates. No stealth, no cloak, just raw speed. Their goal, smash through the blockade, crash into the dome, and seize the vault. They would lose half the fleet, maybe more. But if they succeeded, the Varnak would never bury the truth again. The men didn't argue. Not because they believed in survival, but because they believed in Thorn. The Armada assembled in the dead zone. 43 ships, each scarred, each painted black and red. Crews of humans, aliens, and criminals alike stood ready. Some wore patched uniforms, others rags, but all of them shared one thing, the fire of Ka-9 in their eyes. Thorn stood on the bridge of the judgment. His side still ached. His body was weak, but his voice was iron. They erased Ka-9. They erased Sarsis IV. They think silence will save them. But the dead scream louder than lies. Today we don't ask for justice. Today we make them choke on truth. The men roared. The ships roared. And the Armada of Vengeance dove into hell. The assault began at 200 planetary time. The judgment warped in first alone, drawing the full attention of 17 orbital cannons and 8 carrier fleets. Plasma storms lit the sky. Missiles screamed across the void. And then the rest of the Armada tore through behind it. Missiles shrieked, EMP nets flared. Half the blockade scrambled in chaos. Ships defected mid-battle, their crews turning on the Varnak as proof of Veilfare spread across comms. The sky above Varnak Prime became a graveyard. The judgment took hit after hit, hull tearing open, fires roaring through decks. Men screamed and vented into space. Still, Thorn stood unshaken, his voice sharp as steel. Punch through, straight to the dome. The judgment dove, trailing fire like a falling star. It broke atmosphere, skidding across steel streets, crashing to a halt outside the vault compound. 8 men crawled from the wreckage. Thorn among them. They fought through blood and smoke. Security drones swarmed. Gas hissed through vents. Explosions ripped the corridors apart. Men died screaming. Merrick was dragged down by spider drones, detonating a grenade under his chest to take them all. By the time they reached the vault, only Thorn and Davin remained. Bleeding, broken. Alive. The vault door loomed, locked by alien biometrics. Thorn dragged a dead officer's body across the floor, forcing its palm against the reader. The doors hissed open. Inside lay rows of servers glowing like veins of fire. Logs, records, footage. Proof. Thorn didn't hesitate. He plugged in the transmitter. The files poured into the Armada's command fleet. From there, they spread across every system, every colony, every world. The truth flooded the galaxy like wildfire. Project Veilfare, the experiments, the simulations, the human diplomats who signed off on genocide, the Varnak who paid for it, the cold betrayal of Ka-9. No one could deny it now. No one could bury it now. The ground shook, explosives in the vault's foundation. The Varnak had rigged it to collapse. Davin looked at Thorn. We can't get out. Thorn's voice was steady. Doesn't matter, we did what we came for. He sat beside the servers, blood pooling at his feet. Better this than being forgotten. The ceiling cracked, fire rained down. Thorn whispered into the comm. His last words carried across the galaxy. You erased Ka-9, you erased us, now we erase you. History won't forget. The dead scream louder than lies. The vault imploded, and the world turned white. It took 3 days for the dust to settle over Varnak Prime. By then, the vault was gone, a crater smoldering in the heart of the Capitol dome. The judgment was nothing but fragments scattered across the atmosphere. Adrian Thorn was nothing but ash whispered through fractured comms. But his name remained. And names have power. The first to carry it forward was Weller Cade. A former logistics officer under Thorn, Cade had survived the chaos at the edges of the battle. Younger than most, less scarred, but hardened by the same fire. He was Thorn's kind of leader. He didn't burn with rage. He didn't roar like a storm. He spoke with conviction. And the survivors listened. Within a week, over 80 fringe colonies declared independence. Dozens of Federation captains resigned their commissions, citing betrayal. Ships painted their hulls black and red. Cade took command not with ceremony, but necessity. He stood on the deck of the Ardent Vow, a former patrol vessel turned warship, matte gray with a single blood-red stripe. Davin stood beside him, limping, bandaged, but alive. At his other side was Kier, an ex-engineer turned tactician. Together, they forged something new. The Iron Accord. Not a government, not an empire, a promise. That silence would never again be bought with innocent blood. Earth panicked. High Command fractured. Investigations turned to purges. Admirals executed their own in secrecy. The Federation's grip collapsed under the weight of Veilfare's truth. Protests consumed its megacities. Soldiers deserted in droves. The Varnak fared no better. Their empire splintered into clans. Some claimed innocence, others demanded vengeance, others drowned in denial. Civil war erupted across their systems. And in the void between, the Iron Accord grew. Colonies rallied to its banner. Defectors bled into its fleets. Mercenaries signed contracts not for coin, but for a chance to spit in the face of silence. Thorn had died a war criminal to Earth. But to the forgotten, he had become something else. A banners, a prayer, a myths. But myths are dangerous. The Federation's remnants knew bullets couldn't kill a myth, so they tried something else. They called themselves the heirs of order, former strategists, Black Ops agents, ghosts who had once managed humanity's shadows. To them, Thorn's truth wasn't freedom, it was chaos, and chaos could not be allowed to live. They struck from the dark, infiltrators disguised as Accord soldiers, assassins hiding among refugees, viruses planted in supply shipments. 2 colonies burned from false humanitarian drops. A third starved when its supply fleet turned out to be poison. The Accord bled, not from open battle, but from shadows gnawing at its edges. It was Davin who turned the tide. Half-dead, lungs failing from the raid on Varnak Prime, he carried a shard of Thorn's legacy, a data chip Thorn had left behind, hidden in a vial around Davin's neck. For weeks it had been uncrackable, a ghost code locked behind layers of encryption. Until one night, Davin crushed the vial in his hand, embedding the shard into his palm, bleeding over the console as Kier worked beside him. 3 hours later, the code cracked. Inside was Thorn's contingency. Protocol Blackroot, a worm buried in both Varnak and Federation systems, triggered by the Vault broadcast, lying dormant until the right moment. It was brutal, ruthless. With one activation, drone fleets rerouted. Defense satellites turned on their masters. Supply chains collapsed. Fuel lines dried. Blackroot was not victory, it was chaos. And chaos was enough. The galaxy shuddered. On Earth, power grids stuttered. In Varnak space, fleets fired on their own allies. Entire sectors fell dark as automated defenses tore friend from foe. And in that chaos, the Accord struck. Not to conquer, but to dismantle. Every raid was aimed at tearing down the towers built on silence. And with every strike, Cade repeated the same line Thorn had once whispered in blood. This is for the ones you erased. 6 months later, the Federation was gone. Its command core devoured by mutiny, its fleets scattered into dust, its colonies fractured into independent systems. The Varnak Confederacy fared no better. Its homeworld lay a crater, its empire dissolved into warring clans. In the void left behind, the Iron Accord thrived. 37 colonies swore allegiance, not to Cade, not to a flag, but to Thorn's truth. On the Ardent Vow, a scorched steel plate was welded into the command chamber. Upon it was carved the Accord's founding words. We do not seek conquest. We do not crave titles. We promise this, never again will silence be paid for with innocent lives. But enemies remained. The heirs of order struck again, unleashing a falsified broadcast across 300 systems. A deepfake of Thorn, snarling into the camera. We do not want peace. We do not want coexistence. We want war until every last Varnak and collaborator is dead. The galaxy wavered, colonies trembled, allies faltered. But Davin still had one weapon left, Thorn's real last message, recorded in the vault moments before the collapse. Bloodied, broken, honest. I'm not a good man, I'm not a hero. I've killed more than I've saved. But they burned children and they lied. I couldn't live with that. So if you're hearing this, don't let them rebuild their empire on silence. Burn it all. Make them earn every inch of peace. And never, never let the truth die with me. The broadcast shattered the falsehood. The galaxy wept, and then it hardened. Cade refused a crown. He took something else instead. The blade forged from the wreckage of the judgment. It was set into a pedestal of black steel in the Accord's chamber. A leader would not rule by bloodline or title. They would pull the blade free. Not a privilege. A burden. A reminder that leadership was weight, not power. And Cade carried it. The war lasted another year. The heirs of order unleashed ancient kill satellites, weapons designed to scorch continents. The Accord bled in the defense of Selena Outpost, their headquarters. Davin made the final sacrifice, crashing a pod loaded with EMP warheads into the core of one satellite. His last words echoed across the net. "Still here, you bastards. Say hi to Thorn for me." The satellite grid died. Selena lived. The heirs were broken. The war ended not with peace, but exhaustion. And in the ashes, legends grew. On colonies across the verge, children carved Thorn's symbol into walls, a broken circle, a mark of fire. Families whispered his name like a prayer. Mercenaries painted it on their ships. Refugees etched it into the steel of rebuilt homes. Adrian Thorn had died a traitor to Earth. But to the forgotten, he had become the fire that never went out. Some say he died in the vault, his bones buried in molten steel. Others whisper he escaped, disfigured, silent, walking among the far colonies with a blade across his back, judging those who forgot. The truth doesn't matter, because he doesn't need to come back. The story of K9 is enough. The Armada of Vengeance became the Iron Accord, and the galaxy learned a lesson written in fire and blood. The forgotten do not stay silent. Years later, on a mining world scarred with ash, a boy stood at the edge of a crimson sky. He asked his father why the stars sometimes burned red. His father answered softly, "Because once men refused to be erased." And above them, in the endless black, the mark of Thorn burned, not a fleet, not a man, but a legacy carved in vengeance and defiance.